This wasn't a fairy tale wedding, it was a carefully staged spectacle hiding secrets that were never meant to surface. And now, the truth is slipping out piece by piece, exposing a story far darker than anyone expected.
Prince Harry and Meghan have hit back at controversial biographer Tom Bower over his new book, which says Prince Harry was brainwashed by his wife.
Tom Bower didn't just raise eyebrows, he detonated a narrative that had been polished to perfection for years. 10 ugly truths buried beneath lace, diamonds, and royal smiles, 10 cracks in the image that millions believed was flawless. And once you start looking closely, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Because this wasn't just a wedding, it was a turning point, a quiet collision between ambition and institution, where every move suddenly feels calculated. Ugly truth number 1 doesn't whisper, it echoes. She hunted a prince. Not in the fairy tale sense, not in the romantic, accidental love story the world was sold. No, this begins earlier. 2013, the end of a marriage, a clean break from Trevor Engelson. But instead of retreat, something shifts, something sharp, something strategic. Because from that moment, the direction changes. The rooms get more exclusive, the faces get more powerful, the guest lists more curated. And suddenly, it's not just about acting anymore. It's about proximity, influence, access. Why London? Why the sudden fascination with British high society? Why the carefully documented presence in circles that orbit power? Social media doesn't lie, it leaves breadcrumbs, trips, connections, faces that matter. And by the time 2016 arrives, by the time that blind date at Soho House happens, was it really blind at all? Because look at the alignment. Interests that mirror his, causes that match his, a persona that fits seamlessly into his world. Too seamless, almost rehearsed. Coincidence or preparation? Tom Bower doesn't suggest, he implies something far more deliberate. And when you place the timeline side by side, the picture becomes uncomfortable. Because sometimes the meeting isn't the beginning. Sometimes it's the execution of a plan already in motion. And just as that realization begins to settle, the whispers get louder. Duchess Difficult, allegations of bullying, tyrant in high heels. Where do those labels come from? Who started them? And why do they keep resurfacing in completely different contexts? Ugly truth number 2 isn't loud, it's subtle, almost invisible unless you know what you're looking at. The wedding day, May 19th, 2018. Cameras everywhere, eyes locked on the dress, the smiles, the spectacle. But outside, waiting quietly, was something far more telling. A car, not just any car, a Rolls-Royce Phantom IV, only 18 ever made. Rare, historic, loaded with meaning, and one association that refuses to stay buried, Wallis Simpson, the woman who shook the monarchy so violently that a king gave up his throne. The name alone carries tension inside royal walls. It's not history they celebrate, it's history they avoid. So why that car? Why that specific symbol on that specific day? Palace staff didn't miss it. They felt it. The discomfort, the unease. Alternatives were offered, safer choices, neutral options, but they were ignored, insisted upon. And suddenly, something that looks like luxury becomes something else entirely. A message. But to who? And more importantly, why? Because in royal circles, symbolism isn't accidental, ever. And when a decision triggers quiet tension behind palace doors, it's rarely about aesthetics. It's about meaning, intention, provocation, and that tension didn't stay outside. Ugly truth number 3 walks straight into the chapel itself, St. George's Chapel, not just a venue, a 500-year-old sacred space, a place layered with history, tradition, and unspoken rules that aren't meant to be questioned. But during preparation, something happened that left staff stunned. A smell. Old, historic, expected in a place like that. But instead of acceptance, there was a request. A suggestion that sounds almost unbelievable when you hear it in full context. Air fresheners. Glade. Inside one of the most sacred royal spaces in existence. Think about that for a second. A commercial scent sprayed into a consecrated chapel that has hosted monarchs, funerals, centuries of royal legacy. It's not just unusual, it's unthinkable within that world. And the response? Immediate refusal. But refusals don't always end things quietly, because behind the scenes, frustration builds, staff on edge, lines being drawn, not loudly, but clearly, because this wasn't about fragrance, it was about understanding boundaries, respecting traditions, knowing what can and cannot be changed. And when those boundaries are tested, even in small ways, the reaction reveals everything. Now the atmosphere is shifting, not publicly, not yet, but internally something is tightening, small moments stacking up, each one dismissed on its own, but together, They start forming a pattern. And then comes ugly truth number 4, the moment the entire world watched, replayed, analyzed, and believed they understood. The walk, the aisle, that image of independence, a bride stepping forward alone, strong modern rewriting tradition in real time. It was powerful. It was symbolic. It was perfect. But was it real? Because behind that image, the story bends. Plans made in advance. Adjustments forced by absence. Thomas Markle, gone from the picture. And suddenly, what looked spontaneous becomes structured. What looked emotional becomes orchestrated. Even the smallest detail, a brief interaction with the palace aide, doesn't sit right. A flicker of tension. A moment too quick to fully see, but long enough to be noticed. Brushed aside. Literally. No sound, no explanation, just movement. And then composure. The walk continues. The image holds. The narrative remains intact. But once you know there was more happening behind the scenes, you can't unsee it, because what the world saw and what actually happened may not be the same thing at all. And if these were only the first 4 truths, then what comes next isn't just uncomfortable. It's explosive. And just when it seemed like the story had already crossed every line between reality and illusion, ugly truth number 5 quietly explodes years later. Not during the wedding, but in a moment that rewrote everything people thought they knew. Because suddenly the narrative shifts away from Windsor, away from the cameras, into a private garden, a secret ceremony, a hidden exchange of vows, a claim that the real marriage happened 3 days before the world ever saw it. It sounds intimate. It sounds rebellious. It sounds like a love story breaking free from royal rules. But then reality intervenes. The Justin Welby steps forward, carefully, calmly, and dismantles the entire claim. No private legal ceremony, no official vows, no secret marriage. Just one recognized moment. The one broadcast to the world on May 19th. And suddenly, the narrative fractures. What was presented as truth becomes something else. Reframed, softened, re-explained as a private exchange, not a wedding. But here's where the tension sharpens. Because it's not just about a misunderstanding. It's about storytelling. About how moments are shaped, presented, amplified. About how something personal becomes something public. And then something questioned. And once that crack appears, it doesn't close. It widens, quietly, persistently. And then comes ugly truth number 6, not in a palace, not on a stage, but in the raw, unfiltered environment of Sandringham. A weekend that was supposed to be simple, friendly, easy. A test, perhaps, but a gentle one. Old friends, familiar grounds, no cameras, no pressure. But something shifts almost immediately. The conversations don't stay light. They don't stay casual. They go deeper, sharper, into territory that makes people uncomfortable. Feminism, identity, values, not wrong topics, but unexpected ones in that setting. And suddenly, the mood changes, not visibly at first, but subtly. A tension that builds in pauses, in glances, in the way laughter doesn't land the same way it used to, because these weren't strangers. These were Prince Harry's inner circle. People who knew him before the titles, before the expectations. And when they walk away from that weekend with doubt, not excitement, not warmth, but unease, it matters. They speak up. Quietly, honestly. They tell him what they feel, and that's when something irreversible happens. Distance. Not immediate, not dramatic, but steady. Conversations fade, invitations disappear, presence turns into absence. And by the time the wedding arrives, some of those voices are no longer there at all. Not even at the private dinner that followed. It's subtle on the surface, but underneath, it's seismic. Because when someone begins to drift away from the people who once grounded them, it raises a question no one wants to ask out loud. What changed? Ugly truth number 7 answers that question in the most uncomfortable way possible. Through absence. A father missing from one of the most important days in his daughter's life. Thomas Markle not walking her down the aisle, not sitting in the chapel, not present at all. At first, it's explained away. Confusion, health issues, timing, circumstances. But the deeper you look, the less simple it feels. Because behind the scenes, according to Bauer's account, this wasn't chaos. It was control. A situation managed carefully, deliberately, shaping not just who was present, but what the world would see. Because image matters, especially when billions are watching. And Thomas Markle, with his background, his unpredictability, monarchy didn't fit that image. Attempts were made. King Charles III reportedly stepping in, encouraging reconciliation. A simple conversation that could have changed everything, but it doesn't happen. Instead, the narrative locks into place. Security concerns, practical explanations, cleaned, controlled, and in the end, only one family member remains, Doria Ragland. Everyone else, gone. And when a moment that should feel full suddenly feels empty, people notice, even if they can't explain why. Then comes ugly truth number 8, and this one doesn't hide in absence. It erupts in conflict, quiet, internal, but unmistakable. The tiara, a symbol of royalty, tradition, history, not just jewelry, authority. And suddenly it becomes the center of a disagreement that reaches the highest level. Choices are presented, options carefully selected, boundaries clearly defined. But one piece stands out, the emerald kokoshnik tiara, desired, requested, insisted upon, and denied. Because within the palace, these decisions aren't personal, they're institutional, governed by rules that don't bend easily. And when resistance meets those rules, friction is inevitable. Prince Harry reportedly steps in, defending, pushing, reinforcing a mindset that clashes directly with royal protocol. What Meghan wants, Meghan gets. But that sentence doesn't land the way it's intended, because this isn't a world where individual wants override centuries of hierarchy. And when the line is crossed, someone responds. Queen Elizabeth II. Calm, direct, unyielding. The message is clear, choice exists, but only within limits. The institution decides, not the individual. And just like that, the illusion of control cracks. Not publicly, never publicly, but internally, the balance shifts. And once that shift happens, it doesn't reverse. Ugly truth number 9 takes something small, a disagreement over dresses, and turns it into something far bigger. A story that spreads globally, shaping perception in seconds. The claim Catherine, Princess of Wales, made Meghan cry. Simple, emotional, powerful, and devastating, because it paints a clear picture. One person hurt, the other responsible. And when one side stays silent, the story settles. It becomes truth in the public mind. But behind closed doors, another version exists. A quieter one, less dramatic, more procedural. Concerns about dresses, fit, protocol, details that matter in royal settings. No shouting, no cruelty, just tension. But tension can be interpreted in different ways. And when only one interpretation reaches millions, the damage is done. Because silence in moments like this isn't neutral. It's powerful. It allows one version to dominate, to define, to stick, and even years later, it doesn't fully fade. But ugly truth number 10 doesn't just linger. It looms, quietly, invisibly, like something waiting in the background, never fully revealed, but never fully gone. The bullying dossier. Not rumor, not speculation. A formal investigation. Internal. Documented. Real. Complaints from staff. Patterns of behavior. Messages sent at 5 a.m. Pressure that didn't ease. Words that didn't soften. And slowly, an environment that shifted from professional to overwhelming. Some described tears. Others described fear. Not dramatic outbursts, but constant intensity. Relentless. And then, silence. The investigation closes. The findings remain private, locked away, protected, officially to preserve those involved. But according to Bauer, that's not the full story, because those documents don't disappear. They're stored, filed, waiting. A counter-narrative, a shadow record. And that's where the tension reaches its peak. Because now, it's not just about what's been said, it's about what hasn't. What exists behind the scenes? What could surface? What could change everything if it ever did? And suddenly, every interview, every statement, every carefully chosen word feels different, heavier, riskier, because both sides know something the public doesn't, and neither side is blinking. So now the question isn't just what happened during that wedding, it's what's still being hidden. Because if these 10 truths are only the pieces we can see, then what's left in the dark might be the part that changes the story completely.